We heard more from the governor also. At about 11 that morning he sent the commander and a detail of soldiers to invite us to lunch with him at 2 that afternoon. We accepted, and at the appointed hour there was a guard waiting to escort us to the governor's house. The reader will understand there were no fine equipages in that country, so we used the only mode of locomotion we had, walking. When we arrived at the governor's house, we found that a number of lamas, including the high priest from the nearby monastery, had preceded us. We learned that this monastery housed from 15 to 1800 lamas and was of considerable importance. The governor was one of the higher body of priesthood of the monastery. We at first expected a lively discussion, but soon learned that the luncheon was only for the purpose of getting acquainted with the members of our party. Our friends were very well acquainted with the high priest, as they had met a great many times and had worked together. This, it seems, the governor did not know until that morning, as the high priest had been away from the monastery for about 3 years and had returned only the evening before our arrival. During the course of the lunch we found that these lamas were well educated, had a broad outlook on life, had traveled a great deal, and 2 of them had spent a year in England and America. They had been told by the governor of what had occurred the evening before, and in all a very close friendly feeling was evidenced before the luncheon was concluded. As for the governor, we found him a very congenial fellow, and the only mention made of the previous evening was to the effect that a great enlightenment had come to him. He plainly said that until the last evening he had harbored a great hatred for all foreigners. We were obliged to carry on all conversation through interpreters, which is not very satisfactory when one wishes to get at the deep thoughts of the other. Before we left, we were extended a cordial invitation to visit the monastery and spend the next day there as their guest. At Emal's suggestion we accepted, and the next day spent with them was very pleasant and instructive. We found the head lama a very remarkable man. The friendship that began that day between him and our chief afterwards ripened into a close and lifelong brotherly understanding, and he was of untold service to us in the later research work which has been carried on in the adjoining country. Next chapter. Emal told us that there would be a meeting that evening somewhat like the one we had attended at his home village the year before, and invited us all to attend. We accepted with keen delight. Just before the appointed time for the meeting, Emal, his mother, and I went to the child's house for the mother and sister, as they had asked to go with us. On the way from the house to the meeting place, we passed a number of dilapidated mud huts. The little girl stopped before the door of one of these, saying that a blind woman lived there, and asked Emal if she might go in and bring her to the meeting if she wished to come. This he gave her permission to do. The girl opened the door and stepped into the hut while we stood waiting outside. In a few moments she reappeared in the doorway and said the woman was afraid, and motioned for Emal to come to her. He went to the door and they conversed for a few moments. Then both entered the place. Emal's mother said, "That child will yet be a power for good among these people, for she has the ability and the determination to carry out whatever she undertakes. We have decided to let her handle this in her own way, except that we direct and assist her, guided by what we perceive as the thing best suited to give her more confidence in herself. Let us see the method she takes to induce this woman to be present at the meeting. The fear that these dear ones hold toward us is beyond belief. Many are moving away from the vicinity of the little one's home, when you would think that they would besiege us to assist them in obtaining homes like it. This is the reason we are obliged to be so careful of their feelings. While we desire to lift them all from their surroundings, as we did those dear ones, they flee from us at the first sign of our approach." I asked how she was able to help the child and her parents as she had. She answered, "That was through the attitude of the child, and through her we could help them all. She is the balance wheel in that household, and through her we will reach this dear soul and many more here. indicating the huts that were about. It is these that we love to bring close to our hearts. That little home was not brought forth in vain. Here Emal and the girl appeared, saying that the woman wished the girl to wait for her, and they would come on in a short time. We went on, leaving the girl with the blind woman. When we arrived at the meeting place, nearly everyone had assembled, and we found that the high priest of the monastery was to be the head spokesman of the evening. We were told that Emal had met this Lama about 18 months before, and a warm friendship had been formed at that time. This meeting had been arranged, and we were there at the Lama's special request. This had been the occasion for their visit to us the last day on the desert. We were also told that the governor was next in authority under this man. A number of the surmises of our leader were confirmed, but our friends showed no fear whatsoever. Emal said that both of these men were going to be their close friends from that time on, and that it was seldom they were able to reach those as high in authority as these two, but they were content to let matters move on slowly. We were told that the preceding evening was the third time that Jesus and Buddha had appeared visibly to help them, and they seemed pleased that we had been there to witness the scene. They did not seem to look upon it as an added triumph, but as an opportunity to enable them to cooperate and work with these people. At this time the girl entered, leading the blind woman. She found a seat for her charge, a little to the rear and at one side of the room. After the woman was seated, the girl stood facing her, holding both of her hands, and in a moment she stooped forward as though she were speaking to the woman in a low voice. Then she straightened up and, letting go of the woman's hand, placed her little hands over the woman's eyes and held them there for 2 or 3 moments. This movement seemed to attract the attention of everyone in the room, from the high priest down. All arose and stood looking at the child and the woman, while the high priest walked rapidly over and placed his hand upon the child's head. As he did this, the child's frame shook visibly, but she did not change her position. The three remained thus for a few moments. Then the child removed her hands and cried out joyously, "Why, you are not blind at all! You can see!" She pressed her lips to the woman's forehead, then turned and walked over to our chief. She seemed somewhat bewildered and said, "I spoke in your language. How did I do that?" Then she said, "Why does not the woman see? She is not blind any more." "She can see." We looked around again at the woman. She had risen, and clasping the robe of the high priest in both her hands, she said in the native tongue, "I can see you." Then she looked around the room with a half-dazed air, saying, "I can see you all." She let go of the priest's robe, and burying her face in her hands, sank down into the seat she had been occupying, sobbing, I can see, but you are all so clean, and I am so dirty. Let me go away." Then Emal's mother stepped forward, standing directly back of where the woman was sitting. She placed both her hands on the woman's shoulders. The priest raised his hands, but not a word was spoken. Almost instantly the woman's garments changed to clean, new ones. Emal's mother removed her hands from the woman's shoulders. The woman arose and in a dazed, perplexed way looked around. The priest asked what she was looking for, and she replied that she was looking for her old clothing. Then the priest said, "Do not look for your old clothes. See, you are clad in clean, new garments." She stood for another moment as though wrapped in perplexed thought. Then her face lighted up with a smile. She bowed very low and resumed her seat. We were told that this woman had been blind for more than 25 years, and that the blindness had been caused when the eyeballs were pierced by fine shot from a gun in the hands of one of a band of robbers. The excitement had been so great that our party had crowded around. The leader, meanwhile, had worked his way to the little girl, and they were conversing in low tones.